First, let's introduce ourselves because this is the King of the Monsters panel, so welcome. Let's go down the line. First, let's introduce ourselves at the end.
Yeah. I'm Nathan Marchand. I'm a professional writer, and you may know me from the Kaiju Vision Radio podcast, and I'm happy to announce that I'll be starting my own podcast in the fall here.
I'm Ira Taborn, and my accomplishments are I go to this place called G-Fest. I've done panels before, but I'm just a fan, like most of you, so don't worry. We've got some representation up here.
Alright everyone, I am one part of the YouTube channel you may or may not have heard of called DangerVille. This is my partner right here, Alastair. My name is Jacob Smith. So yeah, we pretty much cover really anything Godzilla related. We venture around in dinosaurs and all that too. So obviously with King of the Monsters, here we are here today. This is my first panel, so thank you all for coming.
Just our first panel, I think, at least for Jacob and I, it's our first G-Fest. And it's been
really good, guys. It's been a great experience. And we both are not familiar with this. He's obviously from England, and I'm from a town with more cows than people, so this is just crazy for me.
Can I just say that?
I mean, I know I'm still kind of a noob here, but welcome to the family, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I just say that people from America are so nice. Like, in England, no one wants to pay attention to anyone else, but here, everyone just wants to have a conversation with you. It's great. And you just talk to people about Godzilla. No one in England knows what Godzilla is, so this is a breath of fresh air. Thank you, guys. King of the Monsters, everyone, put your hands up if you saw it last night.
You guys checked it out? It was pretty crazy, wasn't it?
It was crazy.
Rowdy. It was rowdy.
It really rowdy.
Like, I've never been in a theatre where people are clapping and cheering to a film, and this was completely bizarre to me. This was like something I've never experienced before. I loved every second of it.
What I wasn't expecting, although I probably should have, is everyone started singing along to the Blue Oyster Cult.
Yes.
Although it wasn't the Blue Oyster Cult, well, it was a cover.
But Mike Doty and Ben McCreary actually responded and liked our tweet about it.
Like that. There was a bunch of tweets with the showing last night, and both the director for King of the Monsters and the music composer, they were both pretty much saying how they're like tearing up and all that from you guys. So.
The fact that we can do this is a this is by far, like I've worked in a few different communities, throughout my YouTube career, and this is by far the best one I've been a part of. The people here are so welcoming. There's such a variety of people here, various ages, various different countries. This is absolutely phenomenal. So in regards to King of the Monsters, let's start off with how many times we've seen it. Let's start off at the end.
3.
4.
2.
8.
Although I heard a story from a friend of mine who said he knew someone who had seen it 20 times.
How does a human do that?
I don't know.
That's incredible.
Although I've also heard stories about people who went to go see Force Awakens once a week, every week, so they ended up seeing it, I think, 15 times.
That's a lot of money. Right. Hands up if this is your first G-Fest because of King of the Monsters. Because of King of the Monsters.
Who are new Godzilla fans because of King of the Monsters?
Yeah.
Alright, so everyone's alright. That's good.
Well, that's the good thing is when I was in the cinema, I was hearing, young kids just talking about Godzilla the same way I did when I was younger, and that literally brought a tear to my eye because it was amazing. Because you never really hear about people talking about Godzilla that way, but then you see young people talking the way they do. You're like that's a future Godzilla fan. Maybe they'll go to G-Fest someday. Who knows? Right. Let's give a first impression. Because obviously we've seen it multiple times, each one of us. What was your opinion when you first saw the film? Like when you immediately left the cinema the first time, what was your first impression?
I will admit, when I first saw it, I did see it on opening night in IMAX. Thankfully there's an IMAX theater where I live because I'm from Fort Wayne, Indiana. Is anyone here from Indiana? Woo! Hoosiers represent! Anyway, So I checked it out. I did go into it with a little bit of trepidation because the sheer amount of hype that was going on for this movie reminded me a little too much of a certain other American Godzilla film.
Come on, that one was fun.
Yeah, agreed. Thankfully, my fears were quickly allayed as I was watching it. In fact, I walked out of it feeling to myself that another good alternate title for this would have been G Fan Service the movie. This was truly a movie made for us. That's really what it is. We got lucky and we got a big budget Hollywood movie just for us.
Which is amazing.
Yes. My first impression was kind of a combination of two things. First, I was genuinely caught off guard by how authentic it was. Because my assumption going in, like, when it was announced, like, we're gonna have Mothra in the movie, I'm like, okay, no. That's not going to happen, right? It's Mothra. It's not a character that really fits into a science fiction movie. I didn't expect them to get anything right. And instead, it's like, oh, wow, they actually got way closer than I was at all expecting them to.
Well, talking about Mothra, like, I think a lot of fans expected, like, literally just a one-to-one recreation of a giant moth. But what they did, obviously, they were very clever with how they did it. They didn't just literally make a moth, they made something that would actually be able to fight. Which is why it fits the MonsterVerse so well. That's why it does such a good job in the movie, is because they didn't just make, oh, Mothra, let's make a moth. They thought about this.
Yeah, Mothra is a weird character in general because most of the kaiju from Toho's canon fit into a traditional science fiction paradigm. You know, it's like, you know, it's fear of the future, fear of something, blah, 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 fear of the atomic age, yada, yada. Mothra really isn't that. Mothra is fantasy, a reference for the past, respect for nature, that type of stuff. And these American movies don't really do fantasy that well, for better or worse. I mean, like, a lot of people are saying, oh, we're in the new age of fantasy because of Game of Thrones, but Game of Thrones, like, maybe people have forgotten, but the original, like, praise of Game of Thrones is it was, like, fantasy for people who hate fantasy. It was praised for having very little magic. Like, you know, people often compare Game of Thrones to Lord of the Rings and are often very dismissive of the more fantasy elements of Lord of the Rings. I don't necessarily suspect this crowd would be that type, but that's generally the more mainstream position. So I expected a more mainstream portrayal of Mothra. And we didn't get that. We got, like, it wasn't like pure fantasy, but it was as close to fantasy as you can get in a movie like that.
Well, and that was actually one of the things that struck me about the movie is that, in a way, you're kind of getting a little bit of both worlds because you have characters like Dr. Serizawa who are looking at the Titans in this kind of mythological, almost spiritual sort of sense, and then you have all the other scientist characters who are looking at it from a more naturalistic perspective. I'm thinking of the scene when they find all this information about Ghidorah, and Serizawa calls him a false king, and then the other scientist says, oh, he's an invasive species. So you're getting both perspectives presented there, and I love that they're kind of blurring the line between the two of them.
Absolutely. Well, let's go on to Jake.
Yeah, so when I first went and watched the movie, I love the traditional Godzilla films, but I really had a good kind of a place for Godzilla 2014 and Skull Island, because I kind of like a gritty, realistic sort of environment. So going into it, I was just waiting for something more along those lines, but with King of the Monsters, they kind of, like you guys pointed out, they made it a little bit more fantasy sort of related. But at the end of the day, when I got done with it, I was like, this is purely the true, a remake of the classic films, like what they said, of fan service. It was pretty much pure to that. And so I was able to really get into it, and I kind of allowed myself to, you know, accept that even though this film wasn't exactly as realistic and dark and gritty as the other two, sort of, I was able to enjoy it full on, and it was a pure tribute to Toho, is how I ended up feeling about it.
Nice. Well, that's for, like, you know, my opinion. Giving credit to, you know, essentially what I do is I work on films in general. I've worked on a few short films. I worked a bit on Transformers: Age of Extinction. Did some things there. don't clap for Age of Extinction. Really don't do it. But you know, Michael Bay's got very, very feathery hair. It's very weird. But yeah, I mean, essentially, I was trying to look at it from a critical and a fan's perspective, because I think in 2014, when I was less experienced, I was able to just kind of absorb things from a fan's perspective. I love 2014. I think it's one of my favorite films of all time. It's a masterpiece. Don't hate me. And I would have loved the film to have gone in that direction, continuously gone to a more gritty, realistic depiction. When I saw Kong, again, I saw it for what it was. But for King of the Monsters, it was a lot to take in. There was so much that happened in that film, so much stuff that, you know, appeals to fans, so much stuff that should appeal to people that have never watched a Godzilla movie before, which is, you know, what I was talking about, like you've got so many new fans that are arising because of this film. So it's a lot to take in, that's why I've seen it 8 times. Every time it's fluctuated my opinion, but my first opinion was, I liked what I was seeing, but I felt like I needed to see it in multiple different ways. My first time I watched it, you know, all the advertisements said, watch it in the biggest screen possible. So I did. I found the biggest screen in the UK, which is down in London. It was a very long journey. And it was wonderful. It was almost a packed out theatre, which is really bizarre to see for a Godzilla film. And it was great. Then I saw it in 4DX.
Who here's seen any 4D movies?
Have you seen any 4D?
I saw
very little. One. You've missed out, because King of the Monsters in 4D was one of the best cinematic experiences I've ever had in my life. Because you're getting, you know, when Godzilla's eventually crashing down Ghidorah into the ocean, you get splashed in the face with water. So you're soaking wet, you're holding popcorn, trying to keep it inside the bag, while the seat is like moving around like you're on a roller coaster. So if Ghidorah puts his foot in front of you, the seat will shake entirely. It was amazing.
Do they blow air into the theater when
yeah.
Mothra roars at Millie Brown and her mom?
Absolutely, that was wonderful. And there was like smells, and they had like a strobe lights. So obviously, you know, in normal theaters they would have a sign up saying, "There are flashing lights in this film. If you have epilepsy, do not watch this film." And even for the 4D one, that was escalated at least 10 times, because they actually had strobe lights on the side. That would come up when Ghidorah comes on screen, and I loved every second of it.
Did you take a glow stick with you?
A glow stick?
A glow stick for like a rave?
A Ghidorah rave.
Remember that?
Absolutely. But I loved it. I mean, as for first impressions, like I say, I really liked it, but it was really hard to decipher whether I liked it more than 2014, purely based on personal taste. I still think 2014 is a better film. I'm sorry I said that. But, you know, I think King of the Monsters is more fun to watch because you're looking out for, in my opinion, a lot more fan service. And as a Godzilla fan, you're seeing so much that appeals to so many people, especially Godzilla fans, because it was directed by a Godzilla fan. But yeah, I mean, I liked it. As if you've seen my review, I gave it an 8 out of 10, which I still stand by. I think that's still a really good score. But critics have, you know, I don't like critics. I mean, when the day before I went to see it, you know, you had the Metacritic score come out. No, Rotten Tomatoes.
Rotten Tomatoes.
Don't listen to Rotten Tomatoes. Yeah, boo. They don't know what they're talking about. That's the thing. The thing about reviewers is that they're reviewing it based on their perspective of what their perspective is. They're comparing it to films that they believe are the top class films, rather than basing it on
Godzilla films.
Godzilla film, the genre that it's making it for. You know, a critic should be making a film. Well, a critic's not making a film. The critic's making a review to tell people whether they will like the film, and they're not telling the people that are going to watch the film whether they're going to like it. I think that makes sense. Yes, thank you. So the critics are, you know, they're kind of putting their own bias onto it because they're saying what their own personal taste is, rather than does it do a good job at appealing to the kaiju fan base, which is what a critic should do.
I think one of the issues is ultimately what critics say is still just an opinion, and everybody in here has their opinions on films and all kinds of other things. It's just that for whatever reason, because of these critics' positions or their education or whatever, we've elevated their opinions above other people, I suppose. Although there are arguments to be made. I mean, I'm an English major at university right now. I'm a graduate student, and there's a lot of talk about opinions of literature and what, it doesn't matter what critics say, and what's the difference between what critics say and what the audience says, and debating which one is more valid. Which I think is why Rotten Tomatoes did everybody a service by including both audience scores and critic scores. You can kind of compare, and there are a lot of examples of films where there's some sort of divergence. To give a recent popular example of the opposite extreme, please don't go nuts when I bring this up, but I'm just using it as an example. You have The Last Jedi, that it's like 90% critics and 40% audience, or 50% audience, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Going back to personal opinions and everything, what would you say is your favorite, or at least what do you think is the strongest part of the film?
I know I might actually be there's a couple things I could bring up. I think for me personally, I think my favorite scene is Serizawa's death, because I know critics were ragging on the characters in this, and that was actually one of the first things I thought of when I came out of this, because I thought, did I see the same movie as the critics? Because I actually like the characters in this, and Serizawa is my favorite. He is absolutely wonderful. I am not embarrassed to admit, I mean, I didn't cry, but I did get a wee bit emotional when he tells Godzilla, "Goodbye, old friend," in Japanese.
Yeah.
You got me right here, man.
I cried. I love it.
For me, the part of the film that I probably enjoyed the best, just on a personal scale, is I'm a huge fan of action movies in general, and I've been kind of disappointed with action movies that are coming out of Hollywood these days, because they've all kind of followed in the Bourne Identity model of bring the camera in close and have kinetic stuff, which, you can do interesting stuff with that, but I prefer the more pull the camera out a little, see the person do the stunts or the martial arts and that type of stuff. So I've been watching a lot of foreign action movies the past few years because of that. But one of the things I really liked about this film is it was very willing to pull the camera back and actually show the action scenes, actually show things in comparison, so you had a general idea where things were. I found them to have really good pacing and whatnot. Recent years, especially with more CGI-based films, there are obviously exceptions, but most CGI films, or at least films that rely on CGI for their action sequences, seem nowadays to mostly rely on basically the Transformers model, where it's super fast, super kinetic, the camera is literally all over the place, the camera is positioned wherever the director just feels like putting a camera. There's no real storytelling in the fight, it's just things.
Bumblebee's a good film.
I've not seen that, I've been told, and it's on my list when I get around to it. But the Michael Bay Transformer style, it's just this chaotic mess. And I respect people who like it for whatnot, but I prefer my action scenes that tell a story. That Michael Bay style doesn't really do that. But these action scenes involving these huge kaiju, they told stories, they were paced, they did things, especially the Rodan fight, which is not something I ever thought I would ever say, but that Rodan fight is amazing.
So that is probably one of the most thrilling sequences in the movie.
As the action scenes telling stories, the expressions on the monster's faces are incredible.
Oh yeah.
If you just look at Godzilla's expression when he sees King Ghidorah coming out of the ice, he's like, "You again? I thought I dealt with you 40 million years ago." Right, come on. Right, Jacob, what do you think was the strongest part?
So yeah, my two strongest parts were pretty much just mentioned. So Serizawa's death, even seeing that the first time and then again last night, I mean, it's all I can do, just it just hits me right here. It's just, his acting is so good, and I just love Ken Watanabe ever since I first watched The Last Samurai, so I'm just a huge fan of him. So that was really one of my more favorite parts, but just keeping it simple here, He said like Godzilla's expression. I feel like this movie, every single time you've seen Godzilla, he embodies just being like fed up with nonsense. You know, like he's just over it.
I'm too old for this crap.
He doesn't want to deal with it. But really, I guess when Godzilla, after Mothra comes down in and uses her web to hit Ghidorah up on the building, and then Kevin's trying to, and then Kevin's trying to rip it off, and then he sees Godzilla's reflection in the windows in the building, and then he just smacks him through it. That's just pure Godzilla awesome, just beefiness, and that's what I really like enjoy about all Godzilla films.
So yeah, I mean, my favorite part is probably just the timing of the moment when you first see Godzilla in Boston. And you hear the footsteps, and Madison Russell just slowly turns around, and you just hear the classic Godzilla roar, the classic Showa Godzilla roar, and then you just see him beefed up. He's juiced, he's ready to go. He's got glowing eyes, and he's got the classic music, and that moment, and then they just charge each other. My heart was pumping, like completely. I was about to die. Like, thank God I'm still here.
It was a literal clash of the titans.
Yeah, either that or like whatever gets me hyped is the moment he's having his like meltdown. He's like his fire Godzilla kind of thing, and then Ghidorah tries to use his gravity beams on him, and he's just grinning. He just like,
doesn't even phase him.
What are you doing?
Like, this is
what are you doing, fam?
Yeah.
You can't do anything to me. And he just incinerates him. That's wonderful. Absolutely love it. It's the only thing that Michael Dougherty would come up with, like just little things like that. Like if you've seen some of his films before, like Trick or Treat or Krampus, he's very much for the little aspects that he just thinks are fun. Like he's looking at the little things that people are going to go with. Like, oh, what did I really like? The moment when Godzilla grinned, when he knows how beefy he is, and like that's the kind of thing that Michael Dougherty would come up with if you've seen his films. I might be going a bit of a down here. What do you think is some of the weakest aspects of the film? We've got to talk about it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I do think there were, especially when I first saw it, I did think there were a couple of aspects of the story that kind of come out of nowhere a little bit, or aren't given, I think, the gravity that it deserves. The first one that came to mind was when Vera Farmiga is doing her little manifesto video, and she brings up that the Titan radiation revitalizes the environment. I was thinking to myself, that would have been nice to mention a little bit sooner, because that might have actually changed how I feel about what's been going on in the movie so far. It's
a good 10-minute section.
Yeah, I mean, you could have just easily just mentioned it in the beginning when they're doing some of those news reports. You just bring it up then. And the other thing was, I wasn't quite happy with the handling of the oxygen destroyer. For one thing, it just comes out of nowhere, and this is the first time the oxygen destroyer has really been used since the original film. Yeah, it gets talked about in Destroya, but it's not used. It's just that Destroya is the consequences of using the oxygen destroyer. But you bring it in here, it's like, oh, we have this new super weapon. It's called the oxygen destroyer. I'm like, that would have been, again, nice. You could have mentioned that a little bit sooner, maybe during the Monarch sessions with Congress. Just saying like, oh, we're working on a new weapon or something. But the thing is that it's not given any of the gravity that the original thing had. It's just brought in as just, this fun little reference.
They should have mentioned it far earlier and said that the clock is ticking because they are going to launch it. They just kind of brought it out of nowhere because most of the film is based around the fact that the oxygen destroyer did kill Godzilla.
Yeah, and that's the thing that bugs me is that could have just been anything. You could have called it Super Nuke and it would have accomplished the same thing. That's what bugs me. That's the kind of thing that bugs me about it a little bit.
It had the oxygen destroyer like inside the bomb, like you saw it on the screen. But like Mike, he said like it's got a big role in the film. Does it? Does it though?
It sets up the Sarazawa sacrifice, I guess.
Well, yeah, but as like I said, it accomplishes something for the plot, but it doesn't have the significance of the original oxygen destroyer, which is what I really thought it deserved.
Again, it's for us. I reckon most people that have no idea what the history of it is are just going, oh cool, they just made up a name for a bomb. Like,
yeah, probably.
Does it matter? Like to them, really? I think that's what we think as Godzilla fans is. We wish it did more because we know what it is. We know its history. I can't look through the eyes of someone who doesn't know what the oxygen destroyer is. It's a high-pitched ring in some way. Yeah, I mean, if we're talking from a filmmaking perspective, I feel like the weakest part was purely based on the fact that most of the human scenes were just people standing in a room and listening to things. Because, you know, you see, it gets quite frustrating when people are giving exposition and they're just sat in a room and they're listening to someone and then they go, okay, I agree to come with you to this Monarch research base, and then it cuts to the CGI, you know, the helicopter, and it's like, hey, look, this is really cool, and then it cuts back to them inside the helicopter listening to more exposition. I feel like that could have executed a bit better. And I feel like what I would have personally done, at least, when the Monarch, you know, when Serizawa and the rest of the team comes down from the helicopter, I probably would have had them follow him back to his cabin. Because you see his cabin, but like, what's the point of it being a cabin in the middle of nowhere? And I've seen a lot of people say, is that the cabin from Endgame? It's not, just so you guys know. I would have probably had them follow him into the cabin, and then like he shuts the door, and then like mid-conversation, and then they say something like they've got Madison and Emma. And then he opens the door like a little bit and starts listening to them. Then you can kind of see where his morals lie. You can see where, you know, what is important to him. You know, the fact they've got the orca, you know, it's like whatever he did as a high school project. What, they've got my wife and kids, which I care deeply about. Now I'm paying attention. I mean, have any of you seen The Lost World, Jurassic Park? I love that film. The way they get, is it Malcolm to the island? As they say, oh, by the way, Sarah's there. And he's like, all right, I'll go. And he leaves. It's kind of similar to that. They go, oh, by the way, they've got your wife and daughter. And he's like, got no choice now, do I? I probably would have done something similar to that where he has to get pushed in that situation. But yeah, I mean, what about you? What do you think is the weakest part?
I mean, arguably the weakest, well, I feel reluctant to criticize this film for it because basically every movie that comes out nowadays has this problem, but the movie for the most part doesn't really focus in on, so I like Godzilla 2014 as well. Notably, one of the first panels I ever did at this convention was basically a stealth attempt to defend that movie. One of the things I really liked about that film is it was mostly about reacting to the disaster of these giant monsters walking through people's homes. So just large chunks of that movie were devoted to the aftermath of a monster walking through. Notably, FEMA shows up about 4 times over the course of that movie. You know, and I always appreciated that. Most films, horrible disasters happen and then everyone just moves on, like they never happened. Probably the example that always popped up the most is the Man of Steel film that came out the same year as Godzilla 2014. A movie where, you know, basically the city of Metropolis is leveled to the ground, and then after Zod is killed, the next scene is Clark showing up to work.
That's some Showa era rebuilding time there.
Yeah, that's fast. Like, whoa. But this film has more acknowledgement of the terror of a monster going through your neighborhood than like a lot of other films do, but it's still significantly less than 2014, and that's kind of disappointing to me.
What I liked about Batman v Superman, I mean, probably one of the best parts of the film was probably the first 5 minutes where they show it from a human perspective, you know, when they see, was it the World Destroyer, whatever it's called, destroying the city. You see it from his perspective, a human's perspective. They kind of do that at the beginning of, you know, this film as well, where they show San Francisco from another person's perspective. I always like it when they do stuff like that. I always like when they do stuff like that. I would have liked more of that, but you know, that's just me. What are you, Jacob?
Yeah, so one thing that everybody seemed to not enjoy about Godzilla 2014 is that there wasn't enough of the monsters. So in this one, there were more monsters, but something that something I had beef with, kind of, is that although there was more, it was like 2-minute segments of fighting and then it would leave the fight. instead of being like a long, like 5 or 10 minute long scene of the monsters just duking it out and just an all-out brawl, it would show a perfect example when Rodan and Ghidorah first kind of, meet up. They collide, and then Ghidorah, they kind of peck at each other and do all that, and then Ghidorah hits him with his beam, and then he's in the water and it's done. And it's just so quick, and that kind of continues throughout the whole movie. So, it's not a bad thing. There was a lot more monster action, but I would have loved to have seen an extended 5-minute or 10-minute long scene of Godzilla, especially Godzilla and Ghidorah fighting at the end.
I calculated, I actually sat with a stopwatch while watching that film to calculate how much Godzilla was in the film. In the first, 2014, it was about 8.5 minutes, some of that. In this one, there's about 11 minutes and 36 seconds.
Really? That seems about right. A lot of people overestimate how much Godzilla's in movies.
A few minutes more.
I think it's because the difference was that most of Godzilla's screen time in 2014 was really backloaded, whereas in this one it was distributed throughout more. So it felt like it was a lot more than it really was.
Well, this is actually a really good example of how you set up your perspective can influence this type of structure. 2014 is blatantly a disaster film from the perspective of humans, and the disaster is kaiju punching each other. So that film purposely chooses angles that are indirect or distant. So large amounts of Godzilla's appearances in that film are on newscasts or distant from helicopters or in the shade, because very few people are just standing under Godzilla while he's doing this. Actually, weirdly enough, to this day, one of my favorite Godzilla shots of all time is from 2014. It's the scene of the people panicking in the streets because a Muto's coming at them. They freak out, they turn around, uh-oh, there's Godzilla coming right at them.
Oh, the shot on the airport with the foot coming there?
Not the airport one, it's while they're in San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
That's the scene where they all spill into the bunker.
Oh,
There's two kaiju in both directions, they don't really have options. But that, again, it's very much the human perspective. King of Monsters is the camera's more strategically placed than, let's say, a Michael Bay film, but the camera does go to places that are absolutely impossible because those spots are chosen based on what will emphasize the center of the shot, which is the kaiju. So, for example, you have the Rodan fight. That the camera there just goes wherever it needs to go, but at that center of that scene is Rodan. You are there to focus on Rodan. Godzilla's not focused on in 2014 until that final fight. And that's why everyone's like, there's no Godzilla until like a few minutes in the end. And it's not that there's no Godzilla, because like, which one is it? Is it Monster Zero? Monster Zero is the one that pops up a lot as people's favorites. I think there's like 5 minutes of Godzilla in that one.
I'm not even sure it's that.
Yeah.
It might be less.
I think
than
it's
that,
like 5 minutes and 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Something really low. But people love it, and part of the reason they love it is because the human plot in that one's kind of insane and amazing, but also people are satisfied with what Godzilla they got, and
Right.
yeah.
Right, let's move on to something a bit more positive. Because, we've been a bit negative right now. Let's move on to something a bit more positive, which I think most people can agree on is the monster designs. Did they do a good job? Do you think they did a good job? The audience obviously says no. What do you think?
I like the monster designs in this, and I was a fan of the 2014 design. I know they made some tweaks to it in this, and I do enjoy it. I never liked how there was this long-standing joke when 2014 came out about how the Legendary Godzilla was fat. I'm like, he's not fat. He looks like a power lifter. He's chunky. That's what it is. I joked that what happened was when the 2014 movie was getting made, Godzilla just said, "Oh crap! I need to start working out because those Americans, they like those big buff superheroes, so I got to start lifting." But and I don't think Rodan has looked this good in years.
Absolutely not.
I'm a big fan of that, and I actually like the Mothra design. I think they may have actually taken a little bit of inspiration from GMK. I think there's some influence there with the more wasp-like design.
Almost everything tied to Mothra is heavily pulled from GMK. It's blatantly the primary focus of her influence in that film.
And did have someone come up to someone message me and say, What do you mean you like the Mothra design? That's just as bad of a design change as Godzilla is to Godzilla 1998. What are you talking about?
That's harsh. And I mean, what do you say about the Ghidorah design? I mean, I feel like with Ghidorah, they kind of cherry picked all the best aspects of the previous designs and melded them all together. But I honestly think the best thing to come out of the Ghidorah design isn't necessarily the visual thing. I absolutely love the fact, I'm surprised nobody thought to do this more before this, but giving each of the heads individual personalities.
Mocap actors, so it was really cool. If you ever get some free time, go look it up and you'll see those guys, and they're just like in the suits, and they're like,
the behind the scenes footage of the three of them working on that, because they had all three of them there, and they're filming all of this, and so they're doing everything in unison and things like it's so funny to watch.
It's something that gets looked over that I think, as a part of filmmaking, that we should start to respect a little bit more. The mocap actors, they are real actors in their own way, and even Godzilla had his own. All the monsters had their own mocap actors, so we have to, give them some support and all that. Sure.
I do want to add to that, and maybe I'm crazy, but I would make the argument, especially with stuff like 2014 and this, that mocapping, and with Shin Godzilla as well, that mocapping might be the new Suitmation.
Yep. Yeah, in a way, it's kind of like a reimagination of Suitmation.
You wouldn't have Schmeagol if it wasn't for the mocap and everything. I mean, there's so many different designs of what they were going to go with for King of the Monsters. They originally had much different designs for King Ghidorah. Am I pronouncing King Ghidorah right? I had a bunch of people in the comment section saying I'm pronouncing it wrong.
Depends on who you ask.
Depends who you ask.
No one can agree on how to pronounce the name.
I would play
I've
Destroy
heard it
Monsters.
about 10 different ways.
In Destroy All Monsters, they voice over the guy go, King Ghidorah. So that's how I pronounce it now. King
You
Ghidorah.
gotta emphasize that middle syllable. King Ghidorah.
Anyway, back to my comment. They made so different designs. Some of them were very, very different to what they originally looked like. Some were completely alien. Like they looked like something that you'd find very, very deep down into the ocean. They obviously got designed from like what are those fish that like use their anglerfish. Yes. Clap for the anglerfish. Yes. They obviously took some designs from that because it looked very different from King Ghidorah, but obviously they went back to the drawing board and they took influence from Chinese dragons, which is where Ghidorah kind of got its influence in the first place. And we got us what we're today, and it's far more close to the source material than I ever expected it to be. And I love it for that. Like, obviously they had to change the way it walked because it never walked on its wings before. And I remember people were kind of angry about that originally. They were like, King Ghidorah has never walked like that before. But like,
Well,
you got to do it.
To build off of this is one of the interesting shifts, because the original kaiju, when they are people in suits and or puppets, there are limitations to what you can do that doesn't look real.
Yeah.
Obviously, the amount of puppet manipulation you would need to have Ghidorah walk on his wings would be well beyond any reasonable standard of workmanship. On the other hand, when you're working with CGI, the difficulty comes less down to what you're doing and more to how much time you're willing to put in to do it. Also, budgets in America and nowadays are huge, and that's gonna give you different effects and stuff like that. On the flip side, that's why the King Ghidorah heads never had different personalities before. The puppeteering of the heads would be, to actually convey personality, would be quite tricky. On the flip side, CGI can theoretically do it.
I think let's move on to, I think probably one of my personal favorite things about the film is Bear McCreary's soundtrack. It's the perfect soundtrack to listen to when you're like at the gym or something. It's amazing. What do you think of it? Because there's so many homages to the old songs, especially when Godzilla just got revived and he's looking down at the submarine. They had like a little tiny homage to Godzilla vs. Destroyer in there. It's called Rebirth, I think the actual song is. But when Godzilla's melting in Godzilla vs. Destroyer. He had like a tiny bit of the actual song in that moment when he got rebirthed, like almost like it's flipping up on his head, just like they did with Serizawa sacrificing himself for Godzilla instead of dying to kill Godzilla. So they kind of done a lot of things to flip it on his head. But like, what did you think about that?
I love this soundtrack. I
Cool.
can't say enough about it. I was glad to hear them bring the old music back. I mean, it's. I will admit that's one of the things. I mean, I like what they tried to do with the 2014 soundtrack, but actually hearing the classic themes in this, in some ways, you can't have a Star Wars movie without John Williams, right? So.
But at least those themes.
Yeah,
the iconic
yeah.
stuff.
Although I will admit, what surprised me a little bit was they not only did the Godzilla marches, but they did the Mothra song. I was not quite expecting it. The tune anyway. I would have liked to have had some singers in the background, maybe doing the lyrics, but the fact that they had the tune and how well placed it was. That was the other thing that was great about this soundtrack was each of those tracks.
They were like cheering the movie on, kind of. I feel like.
Yeah, but they were just so well placed.
Yeah.
You know, the Mothra song plays right as she's emerging from her cocoon, and then I think it comes back a little bit later when she shows up to help Godzilla fight Ghidorah, and all of the Godzilla marches were always well placed.
Right, yeah. I mean, yeah, so many homages to old songs. As a Godzilla fan, I never thought I'd be able to listen to those in the theaters that I did. So, the fact I could do that was just amazing for me. I mean, if anyone's played God of War, you already had faith in him as a composer, because the God of War soundtrack, he's made God of War.
He's actually really prolific. He's got credits all over the place.
Absolutely. And he did the recent Child's Play soundtrack as well, which I haven't seen, but I wanted to. I agree, absolutely. I think we can all agree he's done a great job. I mean, to kind of end things here before we, have a Q&A, because maybe you want to ask questions, let's find out. What are your final thoughts? What would you give the film out of 10, let's say?
I may end up changing my mind later, but when I walked out of the theater, it was a 9 for me. Now, like I said, I've seen it 2 more times since then, and maybe after I see it a couple more times, I may think a little bit differently. But like I said, out of the theater first time, in IMAX and all that, 9.
Because I hate arbitrary numeral scales, so I'm going to give it a pretty good out of 10.
I think we can all know it. I mean, that's fine.
I like that way. That's a nice way of doing things. I'm just going to keep with it being a solid 8, but I could totally understand why many Godzilla fans are giving it like complete 9 and 10 and loving it. So that's awesome. At the end of the day, it was made for the Godzilla fans, so that's really what matters.
Yeah. I think I originally left with an 8 out of 10, but upon multiple viewings, I began to appreciate the little things, and I've given it an 8.5. So I'm going to give it a good old 8.5. Last question before we give some questions. Does it make you feel more confident about next year's film, Godzilla vs. Kong?
Yes and no for me. I'm not a fan of Adam Wingard. Especially especially after that travesty that was the Netflix Death Note. Don't get me started. I could rant for hours. But when I heard that Dougherty was working on the script, it inspired more confidence in me, because if I could have my star pick for a Kevin Feige, who is the big producer who runs the Marvel Cinematic Universe, if I could pick an equivalent for the MonsterVerse, I would want Dougherty.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
That's his right, dude.
I'm really excited because I'm a big Kong fan, and almost as much as Godzilla, so I'm hyped either way. I was initially more worried for Godzilla vs. Kong, but I feel like with this movie, it kind of was the fan service movie, and then next year we're going to get kind of, obviously we're probably going to see King Kong shove a tree down Godzilla's throat and stuff like that. We're going to see that, and the tail whacking with the tails and all that, I'm sure, but I feel like that's probably, they're going to hear the negatives of all the movies and the positives, and with this potentially being the last one, I wouldn't doubt that they're going to make it, you know, throw it together really nicely.
Yeah. I mean, I hope they make more after Godzilla vs. Kong. I mean, I know that license ends after it, but come on. It's one of the biggest names in you know, film history. Make more films! We all want more films! Right, but yeah. I think Legendary is doing a good job making sure that the people making these films are fans of the franchise. So Adam McGood, again, like Michael Dougherty, is a fan of the franchise. He's a fine director. I'm going to blame most of the reason that Death Note wasn't very good was because of the writing, because it was very different from the anime, which a lot of people didn't really like. But you know, in terms of his skills, he's a good director, and I'm assuming he knows what to do to make a good Godzilla vs. Kong film. And I just hope we get a fight scene in daytime. So make it happen. If someone in the audience is making Godzilla vs. Kong, just flip the switch and make nighttime daytime. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be an event at the end of the day. Like even if we don't get more films, like we've had a great 4 films.
A good run.
Like we've had more consistency than the DC films recently. So so good for us, eh? Right. I mean, I think that's our opinions done. If anyone's got any questions, there's a lot of hands. There's a microphone here. I believe it's on, so if anyone has any questions, come to the microphone and be sure to ask. We'll see what we can do.
Yeah. I do have another panel after this, so...
I mean, we're ending.
Okay.
You there?
So, like, what direction would you like to see the MonsterVerse go in after Godzilla vs. Kong? Would you want it to end there, or would you like it to continue going?
I would love for it to keep going. I mean, I think most of us in this room would. You know, just seeing a modern, updated, big-budget Godzilla film. I respect Toho. They're going to make their own movies from what I'm hearing. But I'd love for the MonsterVerse to keep going. And there's just such a huge 65 years worth of stuff to go off of. So, definitely.
I think it's turning into a more fantastical route as well. Like, you've got hints of Mecha King Ghidorah as well. Like, we don't know if that's going to happen in the next film, but there's obviously hints that they want to go more in-depth with the classic history.
I think there's a couple directions they could possibly go. If they could get Toho to expand their license, maybe do some remakes of something like Rodan, that might be interesting. Otherwise, I would say maybe try grabbing onto some of the other monster movies that Warner Brothers owns, like Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. Do a remake of that.
All right, what's your question?
I love the movie a ton. It's one of my favorites. But I did also have a little bit of a minor gripe. I'm not sure anybody else has this, but that I don't think they show enough kaiju destroying the city. Like, you know, in the classic movies, you see King Ghidorah, Godzilla, or just Rodan, like in the same year, you see them actually destroying the city. But like,
There's just a couple.
So a friend Alex here believes there's not enough city destruction.
yeah.
You know,
King of the Monsters, like they show very basically.
I would agree. I think there's 2 segments that stand out to me to kind of contradict the argument. Is because there's one segment where, well, there's 2 segments where King Ghidorah is firing the gravity beams of the buildings. They're all collapsing on Emma Russell. Great scene. And the moment when Godzilla storms through the building whilst Ghidorah is like got attached to the building because of Mothra. Also great scene. And Boston just completely flattened. Massively flattened. But I do agree. I think we should definitely have at least someone walking through a building, please.
Like, big destruction seems like taboo now. Like, they don't want to do it anymore. Do they think of it on this?
Absolutely. Next question.
Thank you.
You brought up the oxygen destroyer, and I think it's a good point to mention that because the military can now
snap their fingers and kill any Titan size Ghidorah because he's an alien. So it's a bit of a sort of dampening thing that all the Titans, the military can kill them at a whim. So how do you handle that about this Kong? Because it seems like a concern to me that the military can just go, oh, I don't like you. You're dead now.
Actually, not sure how to address that because the advantage that the '54 film had was they only had one of them, and all knowledge of it was destroyed. You know, so I don't know how you would justify not using it again. It is, yeah, I'm not sure. Because once you have something like that, why do you not use it again?
It feels to me like it's what I'm thinking. Godzilla the animated series out where the concern is less the monsters sort of safe, but that the humans will kill the monsters. I feel like that's so big a concern that the military can stop them.
Yeah.
Because they have to.
All right, guys. So there's a big line of you guys, and we only have a few more minutes, so we're gonna try to go kind of speed round through this. So let's try to make it quick so we can hear as many as possible.
Then they have nothing.
How do you feel about
What was that?
How do you feel about Titanic's Redeemer?
Oh, I love that design. The gorilla mammoth?
I think that's everybody's favorite.
That was the best new design they had.
The audience made it clear that they like
Well, they roared but he was only on the screen for like 5 seconds, but every time it was, you know, like that's just.
Money from Ice Age has grown up.
Thank you.
Two very quick ones. Why? There's one line that I hate in movies called when Vivian Grant is saying, like, as you know. Like, it's a bad way to get a next decision because if it's already known, why is it being said? Like, that's like my least favorite thing.
As a writer, I cringe every time I hear that.
Yeah.
I cringe whenever I make mercy on us all. Which he said.
And two, like, one criticism I've seen from time to time is kind of the same as Pacific Rim Uprising, but not as bad. Like, one thing about the 2014 film that was universally praised was like the creatures felt big, they were slow, every footstep was like shaking the ground. In King of the Monsters, it was more like the classic show movies where they kind of move pretty fast.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
It's one of those things that goes both ways. I respect the realistic, there's huge 400-foot tall monsters, they're not going to move that fast, but at the end of the day, I'm okay with seeing them run up at each other and just do some, as long as they're not doing like martial arts or, you know, flying on their tail, they're doing stuff like that.
What do you think? Good guy in Godzilla vs. Kong?
Can you say that again, sorry?
What do you think might be the good guy for
My theory currently is what's going to happen is Godzilla's going to rampage through a city and they're going to be like, uh-oh, Godzilla's evil now, send Kong to kill him, and they're going to fight each other, and then Mothra's going to say, stop it, and then it's going to, oh, it turns out it wasn't Godzilla, it was Mechagodzilla.
That'd be a good plot.
I've got some theories of my own about that. I think it's more in favor of Kong being the hero.
That's one thing I miss when the other second guy.
Yeah, I think Godzilla's gonna let his victory over Ghidorah kind of get to his head. He's gonna start being kind of a jerk, and so Kong's gonna be like, "Yo, I need to put you into place." So that's kind of what I think.
Although one theory I have personally is, I do think, I wouldn't put it past Alan Jonah to use the Ghidorah DNA to juice up Kong so then he can have the electric powers of the Sherlock Holmes.
And lightning.
This is definitely the last question.
Yeah, so next question.
This is the last one. Sorry for everyone.
Thank
Thank you for standing in line.
What are your all's thoughts on the targeted directory that Toho is going to be going for their new universe that they're creating starting in 2022? And also, what are your all's thoughts on the new roars?
So thoughts on its other direction.
The new roars.
Okay.
Oh, I'm fine with Toho wanting to do their own shared universe. They haven't really given much detail about what they want to do other than it's supposed to be like the MCU. They're going to do, what, one movie a year or something like that? And it's going to be different monsters. But, you know, if they want to use the MCU model, go for it.
Yeah.
As for the new roars, I like them.
I like them a lot. The roars, you know, I like how they pay tribute to the old school ones, especially with Godzilla. But I'm also a fan of the new ones because they still sound good and they really just get that oomph.
I'd like to, it'd be interesting to see how Toho approaches this kind of style of filmmaking because they haven't done it for such a long time, at least for Godzilla. Preferably, I'd have Legendary continue making their films because we're knee deep in what could be a massive thing here. And just because King of Monsters didn't have the biggest turnout doesn't mean it's the end of it all.
Yeah.
If anything, it's just saying that we're still finding out our target audience. But,
Or something crazy will happen, and we'll have 2 cinematic universes on either side of the Pacific.
Could do both, you never know. We'll see.
The more the merrier.
Hey guys, so that's pretty much it. Thank you for coming.
Oh, can you?